In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. Today's guest is someone I am thrilled to introduce. She's a dynamic leader and visionary with over 25 years of experience. She started her career as an industrial engineer and spent time in management consulting prior to launching her own venture, which helps fast-growing businesses streamline and enhance their operations to pave the way for smoother and often faster growth. Her expertise in business process consulting has brought her in as a regular contributor to Inc. magazine, one of my favorite publications. She is also the host of her own podcast, the System Simplified podcast. She is CEO and founder of Business Success Consulting Group. Please welcome Adi Klevit to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie. So happy to be here.
It's really great to have you. And I have a lot of questions and topics that I'd like to discuss with you today. So I'm looking forward to diving in.
Okay, good. Let's do it. I'm excited as well.
Let's do it. So my first question for you is, what do you find is the biggest misconception out there about successfully driving major change in an organization?
I think one of the biggest misconception is that it is hard and that you're not going to get buy-in from the people that you work with in order to do it. And I really find that is a misconception because the majority of because you know how you hear like people are afraid of change, they don't like change, they're not going to change, etc. And honestly, what I found is that it's really the way it's being done and how you present it and how you get the buy-in. So for instance, when we work with companies about process improvement and it always involves some kind of a change, we always make sure to get the buy-in. And the way to get a buy-in, what I found that is very successful is to actually find out from each individual that is involved, from each team, if it's too big of a team, is what's their own why, what motivates them and what drives them. Meaning if that change will happen, what will be the consequence? What will be success for them and really getting them to see what is in it for them and how that change is going to benefit them. And once that is done, then they're all on board. But that is really a misconception that it will be hard to actually get it implemented and get it pushed to a done.
Yeah. I think that's in line with some other conversations that I've had. And I'm curious what you think. Like, there's always the naysayers, right? Is there any differences in what you recommend of how to kind of bring the naysayers along?
Yeah, I have to find out why. I mean, some naysayers will be naysayers and it will come up and you will see it, right? It will be very obvious so that at some point they will probably leave and not be part of the process anymore. But that's a really small percentage. When somebody is a naysayer, what I recommend or what we do is, from my experience, what we do is we basically go in and we find out why are they saying no. Really get in real communication with somebody and really trying to understand. It might be the overall culture where they feel that if there is change, they might lose their jobs. It might be something that they experienced before where they tried to implement change and got stopped. It might be that they feel that the new way is something that it's hard for them to adapt. It might be that we are introducing a new software and they are maybe afraid of technology or not as savvy, and they feel that that's now they're not going to be useful anymore. So I think it's really a matter of really understanding where that no is coming from in order to handle it. And, I'll give you an example. We were working with a company and we had quite a bit of resistance at the beginning. And the reason was because when we interview people, the reason was that there was a lot of change. If you have a leader that basically changes all the time, right? They come on Monday with a new idea and then Tuesday with a new idea and Wednesday with a new idea. That's confusing. And people are definitely, they become anxious about it, or they learn that nothing will happen anyway, and we'll just let it ride and continue with our work. But they saw that here it's not, it's actually going to change. So we really got to understand from each one of them what is the problem, what are they facing, and how do they see that the change is going to benefit. With that said, so let's say there were 20% that were kind of like rattled or not very on board with the process. I mean, the majority of them saw the difference and they were very cooperative and actually enjoyed the process and were part of the solution. There was one person who was very protective of their job and they did not want to participate, right? They did not want to collaborate, and it was very hard to get information from that person. So that person ended up leaving because it wasn't a good fit for the company anyway. It wasn't a good fit for the culture. So, but that's a very small percentage. The majority of them, when they see the benefit and how it will benefit them, will definitely um, jump on board and be part of the process.
Yeah, yeah. What about timing? Right. How soon do you kind of bring everyone along? What's too soon? What's too late? How do you think about that?
I think at the beginning you have to have some kind of alignment, because otherwise you start the rumors, the uncertainty, etc. You just have to handle it from the beginning. So even if you're not going to involve everybody in the beginning, everyone should be briefed and really understand what is it that is being done in terms of change, in terms of implementation. And when we start on a process documentation project, I surveyed everyone at the beginning, so, and very clearly also talk to the leadership team on how to explain to the team what's going to happen, because we want them to hear it from us or from the leadership team and not from a misconception that somebody might have. So, and I also like to have an open communication line. I always say myself, my team, whomever is doing the presentation, that this is our email address, this is our phone number. You can text us, you can call us, you can ask us anything, because I much rather that they ask us or the leadership team than to just sit there and wonder what is happening. So I think open communication, knowledge of what's happening is very important from the get-go.
Yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking about some of our own kind of changes in my own business, and there was technologies that we changed a few years ago, kind of our internal operating system, and that was really more about finding kind of champions early on that did connect it to their why and saw how it would make everything better, and then kind of pulling everyone else along through that. And then other changes like what we've been doing with like generative AI the last few years, and that I felt very strongly like the whole team need to be kind of brought along together because it was such a kind of massive thing happening in the industry. So I'm wondering, like from your experience, how do you think about kind of what are the right approaches, based on the nature of the change?
Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned it, because I find it very true as well. So what we do when we start, we're talking about change, but sometimes it's also I oftentimes when we start a project, I tell my clients, you are already a success, because we work with successful companies, that are fast growing and they need processes and procedures, right? So I tell them we have to be very careful not to change for the sake of change. We have to actually keep those things that are working the same, because otherwise we won't be able to monitor what is changing. But when we start that process, just to what you said, to strengthen it, we always start with the department that will be our champion. We can see who is eager to start, who really gets it, who is very process oriented, and we'll start there, because I know that if we are successful there and we have a champion like that, then we can show a case study from internally, not another company, because they say, oh, yeah, that company, it works for them, but we are different. No, let's do it in a department internally. Show everyone how this is being done. You basically take the early adopters, we make sure that they are actually working, that they're adapting it and everything is working. And then you will have more um, agreement from the others. So that's definitely a great approach. Now, what you mentioned in terms of the AI, where you want everyone on board, I agree. There would be measures or projects or things that we do that definitely involve right away the entire organization. But one of the things that I found is, again, we have to alleviate the fear or the anxiety that because we are doing it, it will take somebody's job, right? So we also implemented AI. It definitely speeds things up. But one thing that I told my team, and I re-emphasize it and re-emphasize it, and I even told them again when we had staff meeting last Monday, is that no AI is ever going to replace them. We're only going to use it in order to help them. So if they stay behind and don't learn technology or they don't advance with technology, that is when they're going to have a problem. But if they actually utilize the tools in order to advance themselves and in order to produce a better output, then their job is secure because they will be able to advance ahead of the machine, ahead of the AI, and the AI will be just a tool that will serve them as opposed to replace them. So I think it's very important to emphasize as well to identify any fears or anxiety that your staff might have because of the changes and figure out how to resolve those.
Yeah, I think that's a really important area. It's a similar message that I've been enforcing with my team and just kind of in general, that human plus AI. And I don't remember who gave this quote, but AI won't replace marketing jobs, but marketers using AI will replace those that are not using it, right? So that
That is
it's not
exactly right. That
being
is so
irrelevant.
right. And it goes to another point here of resistance. There will be people that will resist change. And that is going back to the beginning of our conversation. This is what we really need to break and what we really need to crack, because the resistance is what's going to stop. It's not the change itself.
Yeah. I'm curious to ask you, as companies are planning for a major change, let's say they don't have good process documentation in place. What's the right sequence? Do they put that in place so that they have something to come back to, or do they wait until they're going through the change and then, document the new process?
Yeah, it's always, I always recommend existing state, document existing state, even high level. So you have some, because otherwise you implement change. How do you know that the change that you implemented is actually correct? You'd never know what changes you implemented that actually worked. And you might think it was A, but it was actually B. But if you don't have it documented and measured to begin with, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah. Is there any element of, too much documentation too soon? And if so, how do you find that sweet spot?
Yeah, if you know that you're going to, let's say, replace your CRM, so just document high level the process and the flow right now. Don't get into the system. So sometimes my clients tell me specifically, or we get to the conclusion specifically, that we want to be system agnostic. What we are documenting is the process. And that's really what people have to understand, and I learned it early on in my career as an industrial engineer when I was working with a software engineer. My job was to document the flow. His job was to create the systems, like the actually coding and create a system. Once you create a system or you're using off the shelf system, it's pretty, it's solid, right? Yeah, there can be features that can be changed, but then you have to adjust the process to the system. I always like to see it the other way around, where you have the process and the systems adjust to your process or work together in collaboration. So therefore, I think the sweet spot is really understanding the process itself, the flow, and then add the tools on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So really more about what's the right level of detail, kind of given where you are currently and where you're headed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's another topic I want to get to, but before we move on, there's something, Adi, that you had said to me in a prior conversation, that you had shared that there are sometimes things that a CEO says that might impede change and they don't realize that they're doing it. So
That's
I
right.
wanted to ask you about that.
I hear it like, again, we are in the processor area. So that's what I'm talking about. But, I will have a CEO that will come to me and says, oh, processes are boring. I don't need processes. I'm a visionary. I just want to envision, right? And then I tell him, okay, great. I understand that. And I'm actually also a great visionary. I love the big picture. I love to create. I love to dream. I like to imagine. That's really what energizes me. I'm also very good at organizing. But I do understand that it would be better to sit all day long and just dream new ideas and new concepts and how am I going to create a future. But in order to make it an actuality, you have to have a system in order to push it through. So your staff will actually follow the system. So you will get specific results every single time, because not everyone is a visionary, and you also don't want people to change all the time. You have to have that consistency. Because even if you dream, let's say you are Steve Jobs and you dream that, you decide, you have this vision of what Apple will be or an iPhone or whatnot, you want the same iPhone every single time coming out of the production line, right? Not everybody creates it every single time. You have the vision, then you have a way to actually execute it. So what I hear is that processes are not important, or yeah, we can document, but nobody's going to refer to it, or I don't care about it. So then it's really important that maybe that's your opinion, but don't. Well, first of all, there needs to be a mindset shift there. But there's also be not to communicate that to the team, because what comes across is that whatever you decide, that basically processes are not important. And then you are not going to achieve the uniformity, the consistency, the longevity of the organization, because it's not coming, it's not being pushed from the top.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think you're also then unintentionally like squashing whoever is leading that change or developing the processes. You're kind of telling them that what they're doing isn't important.
That's very true, because that's exactly right. Because you have different, you should have a diversity of people with talents in your organization. Because if everybody is the same, you're not going to accomplish anything. So you have the dreamers, you have the creators, you have the visionaries, but then you also have the people that are very methodical and are executing, and then you have the combination of both. Because a visionary and a creator, and I interviewed many people that are very creative, but they said that the way that they grew their agency, the way that they grew their business, the way that they did, that they were successful is because they did implement the systems, because they had a methodical way of doing it, but mainly because they were surrounded with a COO or with an operations manager or with a process improvement person that is actually driving that change, but they empowered that individual to do their job and lead that particular project.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm wondering if there are any CEO converts that come to mind. So a CEO that maybe was kind of a hindrance to the change or didn't appreciate, processes, and then, you were able to convert them.
Yeah, I actually had, I have one in mind. He's the CEO of a big construction company, and he was never able to take any time off. And it was always, he was there hands on, always changing, like change this, I have this new idea, that new idea, etc. We worked with this company. We documented their processes. We created standard operating procedures. We worked with his middle management. And then he was able to actually take a full vacation. He went to a retreat where they don't allow cell phones. And he was very, very nervous at first. It's kind of like a drug addict coming off drugs. I can't have my cell phone or a laptop or Wi-Fi. So it was basically off the grid kind of retreat. And he came back and he had a wonderful time. He was so happy, because before he left, I asked him, I said, what's the worst thing that can happen? And he goes, he thought about it and he thought about it. And then he goes, you know what? Nothing. And it went really well. So then after that, he called me, he said, I have to talk to you. I was like, okay. He goes, I'm starting this new company, but this one I'm going to start right. We're going to start creating the processes from the beginning, because I know exactly what I need to have there. So it actually functions correctly and I don't have all these headaches, and it's just going to be very smooth. So yeah, absolutely. So that's a convert.
I love that. I love that. Well, and it shows the example of it's not only improvement in the business, but of his own quality of life, right? That he was able to do things like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Adi, tell me, what is the biggest change or the most impactful change that you've driven in an organization? What was that like?
It was the most impactful change. I'm trying to think about one organization, but I can just have in mind a few that, it was basically getting the CEO out of the day-to-day operations, letting them really wear the visionary hat, the goal maker, and having people really understand what is their position, what do they need to do, and empower them to do that. And an example that really stuck with me was a real estate company that we worked with. And we help them create their processes and procedures. We help them define the different roles with the respective job descriptions and processes. And we rolled it out. We had a meeting with all the staff. And after the staff meeting, somebody, a new broker that they just hired, he was probably in his late 20s, and he came to me and he said, wow, this is the first company that I worked for that I feel stable. I feel they really care about me, and they really put the time for me to understand what I need to be doing. And I know that now I can be successful. So, that kind of uh, remark really makes a difference. And that's why we do what we do. Even today, actually, this morning, I got an email from a client that he said, the core processes we documented really work. My HR person was on vacation. There was nobody that knew how to do something. I pulled up what we documented. I read it, I did it, and it was basically solved in less than 30 minutes, where before we needed to basically call her or, ask her while she's on vacation or not do it and create a problem. So all those little things, I mean, that together drives to a culture change and a change in the organization.
Yeah. You've given a couple of examples through our conversation about different parts of the business where kind of it had an impact. And I'm wondering if there are places in a company where you find businesses tend to get the highest impact from investing in a process optimization, or areas that are maybe most often overlooked.
It depends, and I know we don't like that answer, but I'm gonna explain why it depends, because it's really the area that you need the most, because each organization is different. I mean, they can have a very robust, very well defined sales processes and sales team, but they are lacking in operations. So then I will go to the operations. You can have a team that is very good at executing, but they are really not good at sales and leads are lacking. Okay, so then we have to concentrate on sales. So the answer to it is not necessarily a specific department, because it's not one size fit all, but the answer is what area of your company, if you had well documented processes and procedures, will get you your biggest return on investment. And that is really the question to ask.
So is that often the starting point? Is really looking across the business and figuring out where you're going to get the most bang for your buck?
Absolutely. And when I say return on investment, I always tell people, yeah, profit, it's all will result in profit, but you have to define the investment and what is important to you. So whether it is time off, or you want to finally take that vacation that you can spend with your family, or it can be that you're not going to work 80 hours a week, or it means that you're going to go, like a client of mine actually last week. I talked to him and he said, you know what? I actually was able to go to my daughter's baseball practice, and he was not able to do it before. And he was so proud that he can actually do that and be there for her. And that was a win for him. And that was because we documented the project management uh, processes. And it might not have been the area that will increase his profit necessarily, but it definitely bought him time. So it really depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. And how does company culture factor in?
Tremendously, because you have to have a culture that fosters change. You have to have a culture that really wants to see each individual do well. And then in the implementation of the processes and procedures, you have to have a very strong culture in order to implement it. And the most success, and I interviewed many CEOs, and as you said, I have my own podcast. I'm probably going into episode 300. You were a guest on my podcast. We did a great episode. I interview many CEOs, many entrepreneurs, and it is the culture that drives the implementation of the processes and procedures.
I'm wondering if you have any advice for a company that's not accustomed to change, but that wants to or needs to do more of it. And I'm thinking of, some clients that we've had, especially thinking of a couple that are kind of multi-generational family businesses. But I think it can be, applicable across the board, regardless of the model.
Absolutely. So here's what I would suggest. Here's the checklist on how to do it. So first of all, write down everything that you're doing right now. I'm not saying, okay, so if you don't have time, don't go into like detailed process documentation, but basically on each department, what are your best practices? What are your successful actions? Okay, you have to have it because that's the baseline we talked about. Then evaluate what is working and what is not working, right? What area, choose one area. We do it on a gradual scale. So choose one area that you feel like this is a little bit, it's not up to modern times, or it's a little bit outdated, or it can get, we need we need improvement. We need, maybe, you're putting all your eggs in one basket in that area. For example, I had a client that before she signed on, she told me that, they basically lost a lot of ground in terms of their marketing, the way they were doing it. They were contractors because a certain lead generation platform basically stopped working. So you can't just rely on one thing that has been working for several years, because tomorrow it might not work anymore, right? So it's a risk mitigation as well. Like, what is risky right now? So you need to look at those different components. What is risky? Risk in terms of maybe you have somebody there that has been there for a long time and they are the only ones who know how to do certain things. You might want to introduce some automation or some tools that you don't rely on one person. Just giving examples, right? So you have to identify the area and then take just that area and figure out gradual change in that area and introduce it in a gradual manner and measure it, measure the change, measure before and measure after to make sure that nothing is changing. I mean, basically that, the trends are not changing, that you're not all of a sudden crushing your numbers and things are not going well. So you're just doing step by step, very, very controlled, like in a lab, right? You're very controlling everything. So you know what change did it cause. And then when you feel confident and your staff feel confident, then you introduce it as, okay, this is the way we are doing things now. Repeat it again, go to the next one and the next one, and just do it very gradually.
I like that. And it sounds like the crawl, walk, run approach, right? To make sure it's comfortable with the organization and you're kind of seeing the benefit and then building from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, thinking about your own business, which I believe you've been running for about 13 years now. What kind of changes have you driven and how have you applied your own kind of expertise to your internal operations?
That's a great question. I've driven many changes because I started basically by myself, and now we are a team of 15 and growing. So the major change came when I realized that, I should take my own medicine or do whatever I tell my clients, and actually find people, basically shed my hats, right? That I can't do everything. I can't run an organization and I can't service as many clients that need the help by doing it all by myself. So the first change was to change from me doing everything to actually having people on my team that can help. And then the next change after that is putting the leadership team there so they can actually manage the people under them. And the most successful way that I've driven that is by starting to document the processes and procedures. And I know that that's what we do, but it is really, like, in the beginning, I didn't have my processes documented. I did it for everybody else. But then I realized that, in order for me to actually be able to hire another consultant, or to hire another technical writer, or to hire a marketing person, or to hire an office manager, I need to shed those hats. And the only way to do that is to actually create the processes so they can follow it. And now we have a tremendous training program. I just hired a new COO, which is amazing. And I brought her on and she goes, wow, this is like an amazing training program, because we put a lot of work into it. I mean, I basically use my best technical writers and consultants we all put it together. We basically took us as a client and we did the same quality of work internally that we provide to our clients. And we got this amazing training and onboarding and processes written. And that, I think, was really helped drive this major change.
I love that. I love that. We did something similar with our own business of like treating ourselves as a client. And that happened with us on the day-to-day marketing efforts maybe 5 or 6 years ago. We said, okay, enough is enough with the cobbler's children syndrome, right? We're going to give ourselves the the marketing support we need and deserve. And then maybe it was 4 or so years ago, we went through a rebranding and went through kind of the messaging process, the branding process, similar to what we do for clients. And it is, I'd say, a good feeling. It's sometimes harder to do it for yourself than it is for others. But the sense of pride in really giving yourself that time and investment.
It really does. And it shows also people internally the power of what you deliver to others and why is it important. So I think that you're right. It's very powerful.
Yeah, yeah. It's you're right. It's a great success story, and it shows, we practice what we preach, and we see
That's
the
right.
benefit from it.
That's exactly right. Because otherwise I become the CEO like the other ones I was talking at the beginning saying, yeah, processes are important, but not for us. It's
Right, right. Exactly, exactly. I'm curious to ask you, as you think about, the different departments involved in a transformation, what do you see as kind of the key roles and kind of maybe the departments that are most critical to that?
well, you always want to handle the sales, the marketing, the operations, HR, all the support, accounting. I think each department is very important because it's kind of like those are the pillars of a strong organization. Without it, it's not going to function.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So, Adi, thank you for all of the insights that you've shared already. I want to kind of pull back the curtain a bit and hear a little bit more about you. And
Sure.
who is Adi? What was your childhood like? How did you know what you wanted to do with your life and end up where you are?
Yeah. Yeah. So, as you said, I started my career as an industrial engineer and people ask me like, why? And the reason really why is because I was always drawn to both science and people, really understanding people, but also doing things in a scientific way, in a methodical way. And I think that's just an example of what is important to me is looking at things very scientifically or very logically, but also I love people. I love to understand why they do certain things, what basically what makes them tick, like why do they do what they do, and also communication, working with them and helping them. And I always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I started my first business when I was in high school. I had this tutoring business, which was amazing. And started with one person and just word of mouth. I had so many students coming and I would tutor them after school and then when I was in college, and I enjoyed it tremendously. So I was always looking for methods of being an entrepreneur, but also doing it at the same time by helping people and by fulfilling my purpose, which is to teach, educate, and help people do better.
Yeah. And what was your decision point for starting your own business?
I was working it was actually at an international consulting company doing very well, got promoted several times. But then I got to a certain point in my life where I realized that if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And, it takes courage. And I think that is the reason why many don't do that is they're afraid to lose the stability or um, that sense of security. But what I learned is that, there is nothing in life that will give you security more than, doing a good job and actually doing what you're doing and believing in yourself and having that purpose and following your purpose. So that's when I decided to do it.
Great, great. Are there things that you tell people now who are starting their own business that you've learned from your own journey?
Yes, what I learned one of my biggest lessons is how to network and how to collaborate with others, which you do. I didn't learn in business school. I didn't learn anywhere, and that is the power. It's the power of connections. It's the power of your network. It's the power of talking to people and helping people. It's the power of being out there where people are and having that communication, those connections, those interchange of ideas, finding out what people need and helping them. That is very, very powerful. And that is really what creates that strong business community.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely empathize with that, and I think you could see a course that really helps people kind of think through that in the entrepreneurial mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, looking at your company now, what kind of transformations are you helping clients go through?
Well, they go from, I would say, from chaos to organization, because they come in and it's amazing to me that you have a company that they don't even know the CEO all the way to the leadership team, all the way down, that they don't really know what different positions in the organizations do, right? That creates chaos because things are being invented or things are, you can have a key employee that can just leave tomorrow or something happens to them and the knowledge goes away. So I think the main transformation is the change from unpredictability to predictability, from chaos to organization. It's basically putting a lot of order into companies. So then there is clarity about what is going on. So then expansion can really happen.
Right. And what is that journey typically like? Like, how long does it take? Talk a little bit about that, please.
Sure. So, it can take several months for sure. People say several months. Wow. Then yeah, because you're all busy entrepreneurs, busy businesses. It's not like you're going to close your business and we're going to spend now 2 weeks doing just that. So we basically work with the businesses throughout their operations, throughout the needing to sales, needing to operate, etc. So it's usually takes several months, and we start by mapping the entire processes, the processes for the entire organization, identifying where to start, according to what I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and then extracting information. And that's where we start documenting. Because what I realized when I started my business, I started as a general business consulting. And then very soon I realized, I would tell my clients, you need processes. Okay. 1 week will go by. Next week, you need you need to write your processes. Okay. You need to document your processes. Okay. And I go, okay, it's not going anywhere. So then I asked them, how about if I do it for you? Really? You can do that? And that's when I realized that there is a niche for it and a need for it. So that's why after we map all the processes that are needed, we then extract the information because that's the knowledge transfer part of it. So we transfer the knowledge, we document it, we then optimize it. We work with the businesses on optimizing it. And then the key component is to make sure that those processes are being followed by all. And we have an 8-step process we developed that is foolproof if it's being applied every single time to make sure that those processes are actually being followed.
So, Adi, as we wrap up today's conversation, can you let our listeners know how they can reach you?
Sure. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So it's Adi Klevit. You can find me there. You can also find us on the website. Look at the website. So it is bizsuccesscg.com. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, this has been a really great conversation. So really great to have you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's definitely your questions are amazing. And it was a great conversation about change. And you really brought up some things that I didn't even think about before. So it's great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And thank you to everybody listening. I know I loved hearing about a lot of what Adi shared, including the role of culture in an organization, finding the highest impact opportunities for process improvement and documentation, really how to look at the smartest starting points for going about it. So if today's episode gave you, our listeners, valuable insights, and I'm sure that it did, please share this with someone. Spreading this kind of knowledge and information really helps all of us grow as leaders and equips us to drive successful change and transformation in our organizations. So thanks again, Adi, and this has been another fantastic episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.